A failed president. The worst economy in U.S. history. More Americans have died in this 4-month period than ever before. Donald Trump's response? Stop the election. He can't win. We voted during the wars. We voted in the Great Depression. We voted when civil unrest swept the country. Americans died for our right to vote. Americans marched for our right to vote. Americans were beaten and brutalized for our right to vote. Now a failed president faces defeat, with millions out of work and tens of thousands dying from his incompetence and neglect, threatening the very foundations of democracy. Donald Trump, here's the message. We will vote. We will defend America. We will throw you and your failed cronies out of office. The choice, America or Trump.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
The Forum, exclusively on Facebook Live, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Call in or text live 414-395-0484. Thought-provoking talk radio covering all topics from local to national and everything in between. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. That's The Forum, exclusively on Facebook Live, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Podcasts available on our website, theforum2.com. Check us out. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Friday, August 21st, 2020. I really hope that you guys were able to take in those powerful and emotional, well-assembled moments of the fourth day of the Democratic National Convention. And of course, I want to get your opinions on it, because I think that I could be a little bit biased, because I've been a Joe Biden supporter, quite honestly, since the day after Barack Obama selected him to be his running mate in 2008. Prior to that, not so much. But after that, I was riding with Biden. And when the very complicated and crowded Democratic primary process started when did they start running for this presidential election this year? Like 2018? So right after the midterm elections, people were making their announcements that they wanted to seek the Democratic nomination. Because I was already convinced at the kind of leader that Joe Biden can be. Now remember, it's not about everything that he can do himself. It's about him having the understanding of how the federal government works, and how it's about building relationships. And it's about having the right people that are in place that can execute the law on behalf of the American people. Remember, it's not about what one person can do. If you think that the president can do all of these things, then you are thinking more in line with the Donald Trump philosophy. There's an awful lot of very uncomfortable compromise that is necessary in politics. And with those compromises, you have to have an awful lot of experience. Joe Biden has that. And so the thing that I was most concerned about, and my concerns were certainly put to rest last night, because the way the fourth night of the convention was exhibited and the way it was produced, and these very powerful, hard-hitting, emotional moments that cater to all of the things that we have discussed, not just this summer, not just this year, not just during the first term of the Donald Trump presidency, but really since the beginning of the decade, quite honestly. All of those things were encapsulated. But the concern was, as it has been with Joe Biden, can he articulate a message? Can he get his words out? Is he going to screw up so badly in giving that very, very important speech of a lifetime? And that was the speech I'm sure Joe Biden has been preparing his entire life to give, whether he knew it or not. When he got elected to the U.S. Senate in Delaware when he was 29 years old, he was preparing for the speech he gave last night. Because if he didn't deliver that speech in a calm, honest, convincing manner, then it would give the Republicans more oxygen. Because the only thing they could have done was to make this election about Joe Biden's mental stability. He delivered that speech, my opinion, better than Obama could have. He nailed it. Donald Trump will not be able to deliver a message backed up by all of the details of Joe Biden's life and his family and his triumph and his tragedy. There's a part of Joe Biden's story that every person in this country can relate to, whether it's his deep faith, whether it's his love of family, whether it's his just repeated battles with horrible tragedy and loss. There is something there for everyone. It's very, very clear now, but it's always been clear to me, and I'm sure it's been clear to a lot of you. You got two choices here. And we know these kinds of people, the people that only see the darkness. And Donald Trump represents something really sinister and something dark. And I think that darkness can lurk within all of us. Those people that are just so disaffected by the world and disaffected by life, they want to destroy everything because they can't see happiness. They can't be optimistic. Then no one should be optimistic. Donald Trump appeals to them. And I would argue, but not going to argue very long with those people, where's that going to get us? It's just going to get us deeper into a sad state of affairs, into a horrible depression, which some people can't see their way out of. There were glimmers of hope last night. And I hope that some of you were able to get some of that from these speeches and the production of the fourth day of the convention. But topped off by Joe Biden's acceptance of that nomination, brilliant. Executed perfectly. I think he hit the right tone. I think he elevated, his speech and his delivery at the right times. I think he whispered when it was necessary. It was very, very well done. And now the hard work begins. Charles Reeves says, good morning. Love the shirt. Thank you, Charles. So today's shirt, again, my free shirt, brought to you by a Bucks game that I went to. Oh, this one was probably, what year is this? The fall of 2019. One of the T-shirts that they threw out to the crowd, and I was able to. It was Star Wars night. That's what it was. Star Wars night at the Bucks game, and then this is with the T-shirt that I got. And Bucks just coming off of a playoff win. Keep your fingers crossed for them. Susie Roundy Schmidt says, go Bucks. Vanessa Garrett, good morning, Sherwin, and everyone, happy Friday to you all. Cassandra D, good morning. And she says, strong. There you go. Strong with this one. El Cocroft, good morning. Orvana Harris says, happy Friday. Eileen Seeger says, SG shirt game is on fire today. I assure you there will be a time where my shirt game will no longer be on fire. Because if it comes down to it, I might have to do a show shirtless. When I've run out of shirts completely, no, I wouldn't do that. Good morning, Renee. Bridget Ann, good morning to you. She says, go Bucks. Alden Higgins, good morning, brother. Good morning to you as well. Alden Higgins, the convention was good for me. You know what, Alden? It was good for me, too. You know what the other part about it was? Because, the first day, I was mad. Because I didn't think that Milwaukee got enough notoriety, or they weren't promoting us enough or talking about us enough because of the pandemic and the failed leadership and Donald Trump's complete inability to understand how the virus works and what his role is as president. We couldn't have an in-person convention. That's because of science. And we here in the state of Wisconsin, including a bunch of other Democrats, believe in science. You can't get tens of thousands of people together in a city because, it's harder to have social distancing and plus all the other accommodations that people would need. We were not prepared for that during the pandemic. So with that being said, I still wanted the convention, even though it was virtual, to feel like Milwaukee. So all of the speakers, all of the people that were giving their stories and their testimonies of why they're supporting Joe Biden and why they're Democrats, I wanted, at least on the first night, for all of the backdrops to be different scenes from Milwaukee. Because what was most important about getting the convention, it wasn't just the economic impact, while that would have been a huge deal, it's for people to better understand the city of Milwaukee. We are misunderstood. We're known as segregated. It is known that we have racial issues here. It is known that we have abject poverty in minority communities, but nobody really knows the why. Like, nobody knows the personality of this town. You know, they know our sports teams. You know, they know what we're, known for. Apparently, we've got a bronze statue of the Fonzie, which I'm still perplexed about. But nobody knows this town. And I wanted, at least the first night, to feature more local color, detailed stories and history about the city of Milwaukee, so that when we travel, eventually, if we ever get to travel, and you say you're from Milwaukee, people will know some detail about this town. Well, that didn't happen. But the way the convention, I missed one night, so I watched 3 of the 4 nights. But I think the way it crescendoed, it made me forget that the convention was supposed to be in Milwaukee. Because I had a chip on my shoulder when it started. But by the time it ended, not only did it make me forget that it was supposed to be here, I think they've changed the tone and the execution of conventions in the future. Like, why be in some, arena somewhere with a bunch of people yelling and screaming? I thought this was much more personal, because people were in their homes, they were in their businesses telling their stories. You could bring the every man and every woman into the Democratic convention. Look, the delegate process, it's a formal process that can take place a number of different ways. They don't all need to get together in person. All the different caucuses and committee meetings that are a part of, developing the platform for Democrats for the next 4 years, all of that stuff can be done virtually. But I also would say this, and I don't know how much off the top of my head it costs to put on a political convention, but I'd imagine somewhere in the tens of millions of dollars. If you're using the internet and using Zoom and using Facebook Live to do your convention, what are you paying, $100 for internet for that? It's probably a lot less expensive. You don't have to travel. You don't have to fly people out, right? People don't have to stay in hotels. It probably saved a lot more money. Now, we also don't know how much of that money was already allocated for things like security, but it probably saved a bunch of money. And if the Democrats could save, I don't know, 5, 6, 10, $20 million by having a virtual convention, and if more of those resources can go to the Joe Biden campaign, well, then we have a blueprint for how we do conventions in the future. Michael May, good morning, sir. Denise Jones, good morning to you too. Terry Reed Cook says good morning. Sherwin says good morning. Right back at you. Terry Reed Cook says, I agree. So I have a few things here. I got just so much good journalism that was written about the last 4 days. But what I always do with varying degrees of success is I want to do a little segment here on polling. And you have your mixed feelings about polling because, we got duped in 2016 with Hillary Clinton leading in every poll. But I don't think that Hillary ever enjoyed a lead as big on her best day that Joe Biden has enjoyed on his worst day. Now, where Hillary Clinton did poll strong consistently in 2016, and those polls turned out to be very accurate, was with African American women. So the polling numbers for African American women that had planned to vote for Hillary Clinton very much matched up with the exit polling. So the exit polling is you have your reporters and your fact checkers and everybody else standing outside the polling location, and you immediately ask people who they voted for. And then you get a demographic slice. So if 27% of the electorate is African American and you have 100 people you're doing exit polling with, 27 of those should be African American, and 32 are Hispanic, et cetera, and you can get a snapshot of how people actually voted compared to how they said they were going to vote in a poll previous to the election. So African American women were reasonably accurate, but everybody else, it was kind of all over the place. And so the reason why I want to bring up polling today is because you get this thing called a convention bump. Both parties get a convention bump. So the baseline of polling is where the Democrats and the Republicans are before their convention. So Joe Biden, who still was enjoying double-digit leads, especially in battleground states before the convention, his polling numbers are likely going to go up. Because I'll tell you this, there were Republicans that were watching that. Because look, I'm going to watch the Republican convention. I have to. I want to see how they are going to even attempt to communicate to the American people, to find something positive or optimistic to say about Donald Trump and the Republicans. I just want to see the theater of it. I want to see people who are just so intoxicated by whatever Donald Trump has put in their Kool-Aid. It's just going to be a spectacle to me because they cannot diminish the credibility of Joe Biden. They can't. They're not coming from a place of credibility. By the time I'm done with this broadcast, we would have lost 177,000 Americans to the coronavirus. You know, Donald Trump only won by 77,000 votes in 3 states. 100,000 more people died than gave Donald Trump his margin for victory. There is nothing they can say. There is no production, whether it's virtual or in person, that the Republicans can put on that can compete with this new type of American patriotism which brings us out of the dark and into the light. You know what it reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of 2008 when Barack Obama's campaign was historic in its own right, but it was about hope and change. And he had Joe Biden with him on that ride for hope and change. Now, we were in really, really bad shape in 2008. Financial crisis, home foreclosures, auto industries going bankrupt. We were in really, really bad shape, losing something like 800,000 to 1 million jobs every single month. We were in a similar economic situation in 2008. And who was there? Joe Biden and Barack Obama. So the hope and change that we know worked when people are at their lowest, and right now, this is about as low as we can possibly get. Those optimistic messages that remind America of what our soul truly is, I think that might actually work. What can the Republicans do to credibly compete with that? They can't even say that Joe Biden is some old, mumbling, stuttering, senile, guy that can't put 2 sentences together. Nope, can't do that. And did you guys see little Braden Harrington, 13-year-old boy that stuttered, that got on global television, national TV, and gave that speech because Joe Biden gave him courage? Psh. What can the Republicans do? Diane Thomas says good morning to everybody. And Diane, we say good morning to you as well. Eileen Seeger, I agree. Conventions in the future should be a national event. I love seeing snapshots of people in our country. Deion James, do you think that the people who support Trump will accept his loss? No, they won't. Trump has been saying for at least the last 6 months, if not the last year, that the Democrats are trying to rig the election. So he was doing the same. Let me take that back. Donald Trump was preparing for his loss in 2016, then he messed around and won. He wasn't supposed to win. Donald Trump did not want to be president, so we have to go back to that night. And maybe you remember, maybe you don't, because I was at a watch party with a bunch of Democrats that were ready to celebrate, and I don't know if you've ever been to a Democratic watch party, but that's a party. And then as the electoral vote count started adding up and adding up and adding up, I just felt this incredible level of despair. And then ultimately, when Donald Trump had crossed the 270 electoral vote threshold, he didn't even have a victory speech prepared. He was setting expectations very low for himself because he knew that he was going to lose. But he didn't run for president because he wanted to be commander-in-chief and lead the nation. That's abundantly clear. He has no interest in leading the nation. He has no interest in helping people. He has no interest in making sure that the least of us are taken care of. That has never been where his interests lie. And that's clear now. He didn't expect to win, but he did. But he was saying the election is going to be rigged. He was setting expectations low back in 2016. He's doing the exact same thing again. But he needs to win now as opposed to 2016. And I bet if you asked Donald Trump, if you sat him down and you just had a conversation with him, which I do not recommend you do, he would probably say, I never should have ran for president in the first place because this job is too hard. It's too much for me. It requires a skill set that I don't have and I've never been able to have, right? I'm all over the place here. But no, his supporters are not going to accept the loss. Donald Trump's not going to accept the loss because in the event that he does lose, and I hope he does, he's going to get prosecuted. There's got to be 30 indictments waiting for him. And now with Steve Bannon, who was his top strategist, engineering that 2016 campaign, now he very well may be on his way to prison. There's hardly a single person. The only people that survived going to prison because of their affiliation with Donald Trump snitched. Everybody else went to jail. And Joe Biden is not going to pardon any of these people. Well, at least I hope he doesn't. Okay, let's get a baseline of polling here. All right, so this is a good one. This is from USC Dorn's Life. They're actually one of my favorite polling organizations because how they poll makes a lot of sense. So we want to know how Clinton and Trump voters from 2016 plan to vote in 2020. Remember, this is in the margins now. 77,000 people in 3 states gave Donald Trump his electoral vote victory over Hillary Clinton. It's here in Wisconsin, it's Michigan right next door, and then it's also Pennsylvania. So let's start with the 2016 Trump voter. So people that voted for Donald Trump in 2016, 88% of Republicans that voted for Trump in 2016 plan to vote for him. There's no surprise there, but I think when Donald Trump talks about his Republican support, he says it's somewhere in the 90s. But this USC Dorn's Life pre-convention bump poll says that 88% of 2016 Republicans plan to vote for Donald Trump. But here's where it gets interesting. 9% of 2016 Trump voters plan to vote for Joe Biden. That could very well be the election right there. Donald Trump losing. So these people are not going third party. They're going to Joe Biden. Now the question is, where is this 9% of voters that voted for Donald Trump in 2016? Like, where are they? Are they in California? Are they in New York? Are they in traditionally blue states where it won't necessarily matter? Or are they in the battleground? Now here's another interesting snapshot of 2016 voters and what they plan to do in 2020. 92% of Democrats that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 plan to vote for Joe Biden. 4% of Democrats who voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 plan to vote for Trump. Makes no sense to me. And then 4% of those that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 plan to vote third party. Here's another one. What is the third party voter going to do? We've seen how third parties can pull votes from one of the two major political parties. I firmly believe that if Ralph Nader had pulled the plug on his campaign and did not end up on general election ballots in the year 2000, the entire world would be different. I thoroughly believe that. So third-party voters in 2016, 30% of third-party voters that voted for Trump, 41% rather, of people that voted third-party in 2016 now plan to vote for Joe Biden. 41% of those third-party voters, 30% of those third-party voters plan to vote for Donald Trump. 28% of those third-party voters from 2016 plan to still remain with a third party. And where the piece de la resistance is, I think I said that right, piece de resistance, the crowning achievement is the non-voter. In 2016, there were tens of millions of people that were eligible to vote that did not vote. Didn't cast a vote at all, either way, in the year 2016. Of those non-voters in 2016, more than half of them plan to vote for Joe Biden. So if you just add up those details, 9% of 2016 Trump voters plan on voting for Joe Biden. 92% of Hillary Clinton Democrats plan to vote for Joe Biden. 41% of third-party voters in 2016 are now this time around going to vote for Joe Biden. And 52% of the people that did not vote in 2016, more than half of them are going to vote for Joe Biden. Now, this is before the convention bump. So these numbers will likely go up. The share of Republicans that say they're going to vote for Donald Trump will go down. The share of people that voted for Hillary Clinton that are going to vote for Joe Biden is probably going to go up. The number of third-party voters from 2016 that are going to vote for Joe Biden in 2020 is going to go up. And the number of non-voters, even though it's 52% before the convention bump, those folks are probably going, that number is going to go up as well. So the numbers look good across a whole bunch of different categories. And I also think that the effort to register more voters is going to be as robust as we have ever seen. So last night I took the bait. Did you guys take the bait last night? Text vote to 30330. They kept saying it. I was like, I'm not going to do that because I already get enough text messages. Hi, Archibald, because they always have my name wrong whenever they send me these random text messages. Hi, Thomas. I'm from such and such and such. We just want to make sure that you're registered to vote and click this link and blah, 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 blah. So I know that when I sign up for any one of these campaign-related texting services that I'm going to get bombarded. But they just kept saying it. And Julie Louis-Dreyfus was actually pretty good last night. She added a little bit of comedic relief, a little bit, kind of a dry sense of humor, but it worked out. And so I texted vote to 30330, and lo and behold, I got bombarded with things. And they, hi Sherwin, or hi whatever, I don't think they had my name, hi, and then here, put in your zip code, and here's a bunch of links of where you can vote in Wisconsin. I'm like, oh, that's not that bad. But I went to bed last night, and I had another 2 text messages from 30330, so I had to immediately opt out. So there we go. Where are we at here? Camille Mays says, good morning. Eileen Seeger, RNC equals khaki pants and red polo shirt convention. Probably a few AR-15s, I'm sure. Alden Higgins, I'm confused at one poll I see, and that is people trust Trump on crime and the economy more so than Biden. So I would wonder who commissioned that poll, because the thing about polling is, and it's tricky, because depending upon how you ask the question, you can bias your answers. And there probably are some people that believe, because remember, this is a very diverse country, and our beliefs are also very diverse. There are some people that still think that Donald Trump, because of his business acumen, knows more about the economy. There's people that actually believe that because he's been branded as a businessman and been a part of popular culture as a businessman for the last 40 years. This is where having his name all over buildings from coast to coast and even in other countries helps. Doesn't mean that he's good at business, doesn't mean that he's actually equipped to handle the economy, because clearly he is not. Where he falls incredibly short on the economy is his lack of understanding of science. You cannot build a stronger economy when people are condemned to their homes because we can't get the virus under control. And then as far as crime goes, there are some people that have a tough on crime philosophy still. They want more police. They want to see police in riot gear. They believe that these blue Democrat-run cities are just cesspools of violence. And so in that regard, that tough on crime philosophy resonates with a lot of people. It does. It takes a particular type of understanding of criminal justice to know that we have to be smarter on crime and not necessarily tougher. There are some people that don't really understand the philosophies of criminal justice that believe you build more jails, you build more prisons, and you have longer prison sentences, and you have judges that are tougher on crime. Donald Trump owns that space. But again, it's anti-science, because if the data is telling us that more police and more law enforcement and more prisons doesn't have a, lowering effect on crime, then you're not paying attention to the science. Ty Jackson says, because of COVID, it allowed more people to be a part of the convention. I had more people that are not a part of the Democratic Party call me and showed more interest in the convention than years before. I thought Trump doesn't want Republican convention than years before. I thought Trump doesn't want Republican convention aired. It's hard to keep track of what he probably didn't want it aired because it's not going to be huge, overwhelming crowds of people, and you know how he is about crowds, because Donald Trump believes that size matters. But no, this was a convention that anybody could be a part of, because usually Democratic conventions it's a club. To be a delegate, you have to get elected as a delegate. There's an entire process if you want to be an actual physical part of the convention. But because a lot of the different, caucus meetings and the Black Caucus meeting and the AAPI caucus meetings and Latino caucus meetings that the Democratic Party has, like if you could sign into any of those. So any human being that has internet access could have participated in any of the, different sessions that the convention had over the past 4 days. And so it was brought to the masses in a way where it hadn't in previous conventions, because usually to be a part of some of those caucus meetings and some of those policy and strategy meetings for these different groups within the Democratic Party, you got to be a delegate or you have to be invited to the convention. Conventions are not just show up and you can get in and get a ticket. This brought it more to the masses, and then ultimately that's a good thing, because if the conventions are this insular group of people, you know how we are about conspiracy theories in this country, because if nobody can participate and if you gotta pass through this gauntlet to get your credentials and to get admission to the convention, people think some sinister things are going on. No, this was totally open to the public. And I also believe that how this convention was executed, even though of course we wanted it here in the city of Milwaukee, because we did lose out, it brought it to more people. And that's the thing about politics. It isn't very welcoming to folks. And this was an opportunity for people that had any level of interest whatsoever to be able to be a part of this convention. Udell Harris, good morning to you. Diane Thomas, he will only try and compete with the ratings. He will focus on how many people watch the DNC convention. In his mind, he will project he is the most important candidate because he will have the most views. It's going to be really hard to calculate ratings, because if you did it just on TV, because I don't recall being able to view very much of the 2016 convention in Philadelphia online. Even if I was just doing something else on my computer or on my phone, I would get a series of notifications from different websites or different applications. Oh, the convention is on. If I went to Twitter to check my Twitter, there was a live feed on Twitter. So it's really, really hard to calculate what the actual ratings are going to be, because people could have viewed so many different ways. You could have viewed on Facebook. Of course, you can view on regular television, cable television. So it might be hard to get a full picture of how many people were able to witness at least some part of the convention, even though I don't have the number. We may never know the accurate number. I will say this much. How many people watch the convention? DNC? Enough. That's how many. Alden Higgins says the poll I saw was on MSNBC. I would say wait until there'll be some polling this week to see where Joe Biden is post the Democratic convention. And then there'll be another set of polls as we head into debate season after the Republican convention. I think that will give us as accurate as we can possibly predict, because you never can predict people's behaviors. But it seems now politically, people are on one side or the other. If you're still undecided now, then you haven't lost enough people to the coronavirus, or you haven't lost enough of your income. I don't think there's been very many people undecided. That is why I feel that the polls will be much more accurate. But we'll see. All right, I got so many stories here. Here's one from the USA Today. On the final night of the Democratic National Convention, an array of family members, former White House rivals, and elected officials talked about Joe Biden's character, portraying him as loyal, empathetic, and a person of moral clarity. While the prior 3 nights featured discussions of issues such as climate change and gun violence, Thursday focused on Biden's faith, his family, and the connections he's made through decades as a U.S. Senator, followed by 8 years as Vice President to former President Barack Obama. So for those that are still not convinced about the character of Joe Biden, and some people will never be convinced, but here's one thing that I know. When our fairer-skinned counterparts, aka white folks, have the opportunity to spend serious time with African Americans, and they get a much more in-depth, up-close, and personal understanding of what it's like, what we experience, what we go through. I can't imagine how many of those conversations Joe Biden and Barack Obama had, or Joe Biden and Michelle Obama, or Jill Biden and Michelle Obama. So Joe Biden has been able to learn, because I've seen it with my own eyes. When you befriend someone who is of a different race and of a different culture, people who we would typically be separated from, and you get a chance to know them and you work with them every single day, and you have the darts coming at you from the other party, because there's a point in time where Joe Biden was just as hated by the Republicans as Barack Obama was, and Joe Biden and Barack Obama found a way to work through that and navigate through that, so it brought them closer together. Joe Biden has got a deeper understanding than probably any other 77-year-old white man that's in politics today. And it's that I trust. Because even some of you know, might have been a job that you worked at for 20 or 30 years, or your parents might have befriended people of a different race or a different culture 20 or 30 years. You get to know folks when you work with them every single day, especially if it's a high pressure, high stress environment. And I believe what Joe Biden learned throughout that led him to pick Kamala Harris as his running mate. Let's not sleep on her either. So last night was Joe's night, but Kamala, she rocked the house the night before. I'm satisfied with that ticket. In fact, I'm more satisfied with that ticket, especially for the times that we are in, than I was in 2008 with Barack Obama and Joe Biden. That was an experiment. And we can say that now. We didn't know what was going to happen. We knew Sarah Palin was Sarah Palin, and John McCain, the maverick. John McCain was the war hero that was beloved by many, eulogized by Barack Obama. Talk about a twist of irony. So we didn't know what was going to happen with the Obama-Biden ticket. It didn't seem strong enough at the time, because I didn't see the strength that Joe Biden was going to be able to bring to the Obama ticket. And he brought the strength. So I'm way more confident now. And also, Joe Biden is sending these covert signals, which politicians do. When they're really, really good, they send these covert signals. Barack Obama put a lot of his political stock in the Affordable Care Act. And it was disappointing to some that Barack Obama didn't do more for black people, that he didn't, outwardly say that, black Americans are facing this, I'm going to do this specifically for black people. Barack Obama looked between the lines and did more for black people than we even realized. Because when you look at the number of uninsured people in this country, it was us. We lead in every category of preventable disease and all the things that come from not having access to healthcare, for healthcare being too expensive or prescription drugs being too expensive. African Americans suffer disproportionately more than anybody else. So I would argue that the Affordable Care Act helped black people more than any other group, especially if we're talking per capita. But we didn't see it that way because we wanted him to say black people stuff. Joe Biden knows that he lost didn't Joe Biden lose damn near every early contest? He lost Iowa. He didn't win New Hampshire. Who else had an early primary? Nevada. He lost 4 in a row until black primary voters had their primaries in the South. And that is where Joe Biden got a lead in delegates that made it impossible for him to be caught. Not only that, because remember, African Americans that live in the North, especially in the Rust Belt and old industrial cities, our roots are in the South. So we wanted to see what our kinfolk in the South were going to do. Because when Representative Clyburn gave that speech, we know Joe and Joe knows us. And when our counterparts still in the South voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden, we were like, okay, it must be all right to vote for Biden now. And that was it. And by Joe picking an African-American woman, he is showing the symbolism and the respect to the cohort of voters that helped give him his victories. And at some point, we're going to have some conversation about how progressives fail so miserably when it comes to courting black voters. Back to the USA Today story. Biden's pitch: is this the America you want? Biden used his acceptance speech to highlight his vision for dealing with the multiple challenges facing the country, including the pandemic, a recession, and a national reckoning over racism. As speaker after speaker had done on the first 3 nights of the DNC, Biden attacked President Trump's record in handling those crises and said he was not up for the job. Quotes, character is on the ballot, compassion is on the ballot, Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot, Biden said. Who are we as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be? That's all on the ballot. The choice could not be more clear. I agree. And those that are saddened and disappointed that the America that they were always told they were going to get, that they could do whatever they wanted and they wouldn't have any competition from Mexicans coming across the border, and they wouldn't have any competition from well-educated African Americans, and African Americans wouldn't be sending their kids, to the same schools as these people, and African Americans are now moving to the suburbs. That is why Donald Trump made the suggestion of ending that housing policy to keep low-income housing out of the suburbs. That is racially based, racially biased. Those people that don't want to see a more combined melting pot of America, they have their candidate. Bad news for them. That cannot prevail in this nation. And I'm glad. Eileen Seeger says, now Joe/Kamala need to stay on top of the news cycle every day. So it's going to be tough for them to do that because the spectacle starting on Monday, and I'm going to watch it. You guys are going to watch it too. Watching the Republican convention. Because I just want to see what are they going to do to compete with what we just witnessed. We witnessed American patriotism to its highest degree. How are the Republicans going to compete with that? This country is shuttered at home. We still think we can send kids to school. We'll be better than 200,000 deaths by the time November rolls around. How do you convince America that we're on the right path? I'm being very practical when I say that. Where is the optimism here? Because the stock market is doing good? The stock market is doing good because the U.S. Treasury is buying corporate bonds. It's all propped up. It's all bogus. So I'm being realistic here because there has to be something that a Republican, that a Trump voter sees value in. There has to be something. If they don't, because if you can't communicate what value you see in reelecting Donald Trump, then clearly they're just voting because they're racist, and so is Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump punishes and hates the same people that they hate. But if you give me something I can better understand, because right now, people in my own country seem like foreigners to me if you think that the trajectory that this country is on, or I should say the leadership that is being offered at this moment, is one that is leading us to a better place. This guy still thinks the virus is going to disappear like a miracle. Nick Harris says, how do you battle for the soul of a nation when it has no soul? You know what, Nick? We have souls. The nation is not a separate entity from the people that are in it. And we, most of us, are decent, hardworking people that want fairness and justice and equality, even for people that don't look like us. That's where the soul is. The soul is the decent part. Because the way America is set up, there could be and should be a civil war and a revolutionary war every single day in every single city. But there isn't. Because more of us are fair and honest and decent and give respect and have a level of temperance for even people we disagree with. So I think the soul lies within the hearts of good people. But why it may seem like we don't have a soul is because good people oftentimes stay silent. And what at least I have witnessed over the past summer is good people got tired of staying silent. That is the soul of America. Eval Kenya says systematic racism. That will likely be the toughest to unravel. Because that's more than just the institution. The systemic racism that exists lies in people's psyches. They just have a diminished opinion of different cultures of people. A lot of folks have just a diminished opinion. They think there's still a second-class citizenship to minorities in this country. And so it isn't just the institutions, it's how we feel about actual people. That's going to be a tough one to overcome. But I know over time, when people that have never had interactions with other races and other cultures, and once they see, hey, wait a minute, it's not that bad, then those things begin to erode from one generation to the next. They become less and less and less. when Barack Obama got elected president, I will assure you that that was the first time that millions of Americans ever were under the leadership of a black man. And I say that because if you look at just states that are almost homogeneously white, 90+% white, the people in those states never worked for a black boss, right? They never had a black principal at their high school. They probably never had a black high school or a college professor, rather. So they never were under the leadership of somebody African American. And then when the opportunity arose, it was President Obama. And what did President Obama do? Created 15 million jobs and gave people access to free healthcare. So once we have just the opportunity to exhibit what kind of leaders we can be, most people are like, oh, I was afraid of, black leadership and it was unfounded. And so we need just more opportunity to show what kind of leaders that we can be. Cassandra D says, I don't know why Trump is touting more crime with Biden. We have more crime under Trump's administration. You certainly have more crime within the White House and more white-collar crime, no question about that. It's a twisted worldview that they have, right? So when people are saying we've had enough of injustice, we've had enough of black men being killed or Latino men being killed by the police, we've had enough of these consistent, systematic injustices, and people take to the streets, and then the police use violent tactics against peaceful protesters. The whole, perspective of that to some people is, oh, look at all this crime the Democrats are supporting. The Republicans have so twisted this worldview and have so gaslit their cultish followers that when people protest for democracy and for justice, that looks like violence. And when the police use their billy clubs and their rifles and their tear gas to try and stop protesters, then they blame the people who are protesting for fairness. And they just, oh, look at all these Democrat cities where people are in the streets rioting and looting. This is an American revolution. And just because you may not like the participants in this revolution, it's still a revolution nonetheless. And so instead of them looking at it for what it was, how you build a republic, you got to burn some stuff down so when you rebuild it, it's in the image of what we want America to actually be, reflective of the decency that exists in this country. It's almost like they've forgotten history, or they probably never knew it. Eileen Seeger replying to Cassandra D, and why Joe did not point this out. Was this a misstep? You gotta be careful of what you do point out with Donald Trump. And here's the thing: a lot of things that have happened in the Trump administration, they speak for themselves, and so there's no need for Joe to be up there. Oh, well, crime went up under Donald Trump. Crime also is an effect of the economy, right? So when people are out of work, or they're laid off from work, or their unemployment doesn't come, or they haven't gotten their second stimulus, or in some cases they haven't gotten their first stimulus, crime is going to mimic economic depression. And so, yeah, you can tie that to Donald Trump, but that would take a soliloquy to try and explain all of that. But what the convention did is I think it pointed to the experience and the temperament of Joe Biden versus that of Donald Trump. And right now at this point, it shouldn't even be a conversation about the personalities of the two men. Got one here from CNN, and this was one of the more powerful moments last night during Joe Biden's speech. Joe Biden said, quote, one of the most important conversations he had during the campaign was with George Floyd's 6-year-old daughter, Gianna, the day before Floyd's funeral. Quote, when I leaned down to speak to her, she looked in my eyes and said, and I quote, "Daddy changed the world. Daddy changed the world." Her words burrowed deep in my heart, he said. Maybe George Floyd's murder was a breaking point. Maybe John Lewis's passing, the inspiration. But however it's come to be, however it's happened, America's ready. In John's words, to lay down, quote, the heavy burden of hate at last, and then the hard work of rooting out our systemic racism, Biden added. That was a real powerful moment because let's not forget, even though the daily protests in dozens, if not 100 or more American cities have subsided, that is a significant series of events that has shaped not just America, but will shape the future of policy, if not world events. The murder of George Floyd. When I saw people marching in England, in Europe, when the black diaspora that exists all over the world were now telling their stories of systemic racism and oppression that they face in countries other than America, that was a world movement. We're still living in the aftermath of that. There is an opportunity to have policy that is reflective of something that the world has been wanting to change, and it's not just here in America. For the first time, I saw the African diaspora unite. Even though there are oceans that separate us, there are black people who were colonized and taken away from their homeland and had their culture stripped from them that are still suffering the same fate no matter where you are. This is a global movement, and we are the ones that put it on that stage for all to be a part. And so we cannot forget that. So that has to be a guiding a theme through the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden administration. Yeah, I said Kamala's name first. I got to say it. Kamala. Eval Kenya says simply, exactly. Got some more polls here for you. So this would be, who is this from? The CNN poll of all polls as of 8/17/20. So these polls do not reflect the post-convention bump. So we get a baseline of where Joe Biden was at the very start of the convention. America had 4 days to observe more ideas and more stories of credibility. The parts of Joe Biden that may have been unknown, the fact that there's a part of him and a part of his history and his background that somebody somewhere can relate to. So all of that has been put out for all of us to consume. So prior to America giving its next set of opinions on who our presidential candidates are, the CNN poll of all polls says it tracks the poll of polls and national averages in the race for president between Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. The poll of polls includes the most recent national telephone polls, which meet CNN's standards for reporting and which measure views of registered voters. The poll of polls does not have a margin of sampling error. So in the poll of polls, Joe Biden's got 51%, Donald Trump has got 42%. Then we can look at where they got their polling data from. The Ipsos Reuters poll has Joe Biden at 48, Trump at 40. Now remember, this is before the convention. These numbers will likely go higher for Joe Biden and lower for Donald Trump in the next week or so. The ABC Washington Post poll had Joe Biden at 53%, Donald Trump 41%. The CNN SSRS poll had Joe Biden at 50%, Donald Trump at 46%. The CBS YouGov poll, 52% Biden, 42% Trump. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 50% Biden, 41% Trump. The NPR PBS Marist poll, Biden 53%, Trump 42%. And even Fox News has Joe Biden at 49% and Donald Trump at 42%. The best Trump did in any of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 polls, 8 polls, including the poll of all polls, the best he does is 46%. You can't win an election with 46%. But then if you add the number of people that did not vote in 2016, 51% of them plan to vote for Joe Biden this go around. Then the number of Republicans, or people that, I don't even know if you want to call them Republicans, that voted for Trump in 2016, they're now going to vote for Joe Biden. And even people that voted third party, a larger share of them are now going to vote for Joe Biden. Numbers-wise, it looks good. And I don't know if Hillary Clinton had all of these different details and different groups and constituencies all supporting her. So it's looking good. Now the question is, what are the Republicans going to say? What can they possibly say? How can they make the case? Because there's clearly something that I'm missing. That there are people that are still committed to continuing this. The only reason I guess I can think of is people just like chaos. If they're not doing well and if they don't feel happy and optimistic about their futures, then they don't want there to be a future for anybody. And that's a really, really dark, scary thought. But you know that sentiment exists in this country. If you look at the number of, and it's this aggregate number you would have to consider, the number of officer-involved murders of black men that were caught on video, right? There's that. And that paradigm has always existed, but it seemed like they were just more frequent. And then the number of school shootings. And then if you combine that with the deaths of despair, where middle-aged white men are dying at a faster rate than any other demographic group in the country. Like all of these things, this dark cloud that exists, and there's millions of Americans that are living with that level of uncertainty. At the same time, Donald Trump, he's still fighting to try and finally pull the plug on the Affordable Care Act, still during a pandemic. And so when I look at all of those things combined, this dark sentiment that exists with the violence perpetuated on trans women of color and on black people, and trying to take away people's health care, and just this despair that exists, and the alcoholism and the heroin abuse and the heroin overdoses that exist, Donald Trump is catering to a group of people that just don't see a way out. They see the way out through him. And we shouldn't be here as a nation. And at some point, I don't know when it's going to be, we have to say to those people that you don't have to feel this way. Now, we're never going to agree with them politically, but if you have a growing number of people that are willing to sacrifice the health and the future of themselves, their families, their communities, and the democracy itself, we got to do something. Because in the event that Joe Biden wins, the people that wanted Donald Trump to be reelected, they're not going to go away. I'm a little nervous about that because we don't know what they're going to do. If they're willing to protest governors' offices with semi-automatic assault weapons because they didn't want to put on a mask, what are they going to do when the person who has this dark and decrepit view of the world like they do, when that person is no longer in office? They're not just going to say, oh, well, I guess we'll be supporting Joe and Kamala now. That's not going to be the case. And so we got to be prepared for that. I'm also hearing and seeing a bunch of things saying that, oh, we may not know the result of the election for days, if not weeks. In the meantime, what on earth are we going to do? What are we going to do as the electorate? And what is Donald Trump going to do when we're operating in that gray area? If all the votes haven't been counted, if there's been a number of irregularities in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, what do we do? Do we have a plan for that? And who comes up with that plan? What is law enforcement going to do besides be at the polling locations? I posted a story this morning, and actually I should probably go to it, that Donald Trump plans to send law enforcement to polling places around the country to prevent what he calls, or what he believes, voter fraud will be taking place. Right? The same agencies that should be protecting our right to vote, to make sure there is no voter intimidation. Local law enforcement, attorneys generals, those folks that should be protecting us, members of the Department of Justice, he's going to send them to polling locations to make sure that there's no voter fraud. Donald Trump is going to use voter intimidation. Now, remember how high the stakes are for him. He needs to get reelected so the statute of limitations on all of these federal crimes he could be charged with expire. From thehill.com, President Donald Trump said yesterday that he plans to send law enforcement and U.S. attorneys to the polls in November to prevent voter fraud. When asked by Fox News host Sean Hannity late Thursday night if the president was going to, quote, have an ability to monitor and avoid fraud during the upcoming November election, Trump said, we're going to have everything. We're going to have sheriffs, we're going to have law enforcement, and we're going to have hopefully U.S. attorneys, and we're going to have everybody and attorney generals, the president said. The president once again criticized the practice of mail-in voting, alleging that anybody can sign the universal mail-in ballot, specifically naming the system in Nevada. You guys know that the Democrats don't have to cheat. With the wind that's at the back and the message that the Democrats have and the optimism and the diversity of the ticket, the Democrats don't need to cheat. The Republicans do. There are more people in this country that are sick and tired and fed up and have had enough, that are embarrassed by this president, that are embarrassed by the coronavirus response, people that have lost family members. It'll be more than 200,000 dead because of the coronavirus. And what has Donald Trump done? Said it's going to go away with a miracle, or he has played golf. The Democrats don't need to cheat. Who's going to vote twice? Especially because you know that the Republicans are looking for it. Just by over the last 12 or so years, the Republicans have really doubled down on this whole, there's so much voter fraud. We got to have voter ID because people are voting twice. And what we have found is that the people that get caught for voting twice are Republicans. But just the fact that they have made it a part of their, platform that they're going to really, clamp down on voter fraud and requiring voter ID. First of all, it was already incredibly small, the number of people that would ever commit any kind of voter fraud. And a lot of times it's clerical error or someone who didn't know that they were off paper or they were on paper for another 24 hours and they voted totally, by accident because they thought that they were off of paper when they really weren't. Those are the incidences. And it's incredibly low. But because there's been so much attention paid to voter fraud, that in and of itself is a deterrent. When you know that the Republicans are looking for it, and when you know that you can go to jail for it, the dumbest thing to go to jail for is voting twice. Because it's amazing. Denise Jones says, remember the Hung class in Florida. I do not know what that is, Denise Jones. The Hung class in Florida? I am unfamiliar. Please enlighten us if you can. Back to the story from the Hill. Oh, God, I got to go, guys. I got to go do this thing. I'm already over time. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. I got some things I got to do this morning. I went over my time. And I'm usually pretty good about staying at an hour or less. Have a wonderful Friday. See you guys on Monday. And then Monday, of course, is the first day of the Republican National Convention. And what a fiasco that's going to be. Have a good weekend. I'll see you guys on Monday.